There we go. All right. Hey, everyone. This is another episode of What's the Tea? This is our Facebook show we do every single Tuesday at 2 p.m., where we interview either people from South Suburban Family Shelter or local community organizations. And that's what we're doing today. So, as you can see, we have Marlon Chamberlin here with us. So, Marlon, thanks for being here on the show.
Thanks for the invite.
Of course. So we've had some good conversations already, hoping to just kind of pick those back up and rehash some of those conversations. So I think maybe just to start, could you explain, um, you work for the Heartland Alliance, so can you explain what the Heartland Alliance is and what you do there?
Yes. So Heartland Alliance is it's a huge organization that has five entities all under the umbrella of Heartland Alliance. So there's sort of like a housing Heartland, healthcare Heartland. Heartland has, like I said, a lot of different just non-for-profit work that they do. I am the campaign manager for the Fully Free campaign, which is a campaign to end all permanent punishments here in Illinois. And so that is what I do with Heartland Alliance. But like I said, Heartland Alliance has a violence prevention program. They have a number of programs, and they're pretty much all around Chicago, South and West Side, North Side. Heartland has different satellite offices throughout the city.
Gotcha. Yeah, it was a little confusing. When I first got to the website, there's like 100 programs for the Alliance. So, but
Yeah,
yours
yeah,
is the Fully Free campaign that you're working on.
yeah. Well, I actually work for RNP, which is the Research and Policy Division. And so I'm a campaign manager of the Fully Free campaign within the Research and Policy Division.
Awesome. Can you talk a little bit about that campaign? And I want to talk a little bit about permanent punishments as well.
So yeah, so as I said before, the campaign is really the end game or end goal of the campaign is ending all permanent punishments that individuals face after incarceration. And so last year in June of 2020, Heartland released a report called the Never Fully Free Report. And there's actually a link that people can go to read more about it. And in this report, they sort of listed that there were close to 1,189 sort of like collateral or permanent punishments that people face after incarceration. And they were sort of like placed in three different buckets. One would be employment, housing, and education, as sort of like the three main specific areas where a lot of these permanent punishments exist. And so this campaign is not only led, but it's also centered by directly impacted people who are sort of guiding the strategy. They're really helping develop the legislative strategy. And we also have a governing board that is made up of all formerly directly impacted people that are helping us sort of build out the coalition table, think about our strategy in terms of narrative change work. And so that I would just say that there, to sort of summarize where we are as far as the campaign, there are like four phases. The first phase is coalition building. So we want to make sure that we're reaching out to grassroots organizations from the communities, not just here in Chicago, but from around the state, to help sort of build this coalition. We want to make sure that everyone's voice is represented when it comes to directly impacted people, but then also have the voices of people that are outside of Cook County. And so that is still happening now. We recently just restarted the coalition table this month. And so we are positioning ourselves to officially launch the campaign during the week of Juneteenth. We will also be launching the website either at the end of this month or early May. So people will be able to go to the Fully Free website and learn more about the coalition partners, the campaign strategy, and also hear testimonies from directly impacted people. We're also using art. And so one of the goals of this campaign is to really leverage are artists in whatever ways, and art could be music, it could be drawings, it could be spoken words, poems. And so we really wanted to leverage like the arts in this campaign to make sure that we're also engaging people in a way that really amplifies their talents. As I said before, the governing board is really sort of helping to really like define what it means to center the voices and experiences of directly impacted people. So what that looks like for the board is really figuring out like how do we operationalize like what we do and how we sort of bring our expertise to this work. And all of this is being documented because the goal is to really duplicate this model across the country. The second phase is the narrative change work, which is really sort of like just trying to educate people across the state around what the narrative is for people coming home from prison, and also just sort of softening the hearts of people across the state to understand that we're not asking for a handout. We're simply asking for an opportunity to move forward in our lives. And we also want to activate people. So I sort of use this frame of saying we want to educate people across the state, but we also want to activate people across the state to get involved and then politicize individuals, meaning like civically engage people in the work as we create policy and as we lobby and organize and build power to really change and remove these barriers. And so the narrative change work is the second phase. The third phase is the research and policy, which I talked about before around the report that was released last year. But we will also continue to sort of provide like just the research of what the impact of these permanent punishments are. Like monetary like challenge does this create when you don't allow people to move forward in their lives? And then I also think about the revenue that we're missing because we're basically hindering people from being able to move forward in life. And then the last phase of the campaign is the legislative strategy, in which we're still trying to decide if we want to launch sort of like an omnibus bill, or do we want to sort of introduce maybe these like expansive, like this expansive legislative platform, but maybe introduce a bill at a time or package some bills. So we're still trying to figure out what the legislative strategy will be, but that is sort of like the four phases of this campaign.
I like that a lot. You said a lot of things that I kind of want to go back to. First, I know you mentioned the fully free campaign report. I'll make sure we get a link for that in the comments for our Facebook page, because I did go on there and some of the stories that I was listening to really stuck out to me. Along with even re-entry after prison, I heard some people like arrest and no conviction, and there was still consequences for that, even though in the court there was no consequence, but there was a consequence in society afterwards.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely.
So, in the one thing I want to start with is you mentioned centering people with lived experience in this campaign.
Mhm.
How, and I think that's a great idea, and you're sort of leading that charge, is setting the example for similar campaigns.
Mhm.
How did you come to that? I guess maybe that idea, and also what problems do you think happens when you don't put the people with lived experience in the center?
So for me, and I've been home now close to 10 years. So I was released from prison in 2012. And what I've learned in my experience, and I'll start with the second question first, is that when you don't involve the people that are directly impacted or will be impacted by a piece of policy, it's almost prescribing. It's almost like walking in the doctor's office, and you go to a doctor's office because you have a common cold, and when you walk in, they tell you that your leg is broke and that they're going to fix it. And it's like, but I'm not here to get my leg fixed. I'm here because I have a cold. And to me, I think it's the same. If I'm looking Or if I'm an elected official that's not connected to my community, then how do I know how to best serve my community? And I think the model that we want to introduce is saying, how can we collectively work together? Because centering people with lived experience doesn't mean that we want to exclude anyone. It's just simply saying, how can we sort of leverage the expertise of people that are directly like experiencing the problem or may have solutions to address the problems. And then I would also say too, Glenn Martin, who is the founder of JLUSA, which is a national organization that trains directly impacted people. He has a quote that he sort of framed in saying that those of us that are closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but lack the resources and power to implement the solutions. And so this is also another way for, like I said, for us to develop sort of like this collective vision where we can leverage each other based on our own self-interest, values, and then also expertise. And I think we've seen this happen when policy is developed without the feedback of the community. It 99.9% of the time it ends up as a disaster or it's just not impactful. I won't even say like, even if the policy is not necessarily a bad policy, it just may not get to the root of the problem, which is ultimately what we want to see. And so for me, it's really about developing a model to show that if we offer these leadership development opportunities or trainings or workshops, that people with lived experience can grow and learn the legislative process. We can bring the expertise of having to navigate life after prison. We can bring a lot of our like firsthand experiences, even being in prison, and really just like identifying like what would have been useful for me in prison, like what programs that I wish like the prison where I did the most of my time at, like there were programs that I think could have been beneficial, but they just don't exist because it's almost like there's just a lack of investment, for other words, to really describe it. But I think it's important to really center the voices, and then also respect the decision making of directly impacted people. So it's not just about like us being at the table, but it's about us being decision makers as well at the table.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And I was telling you when we talked before, like this is just something that you don't hear a lot about, and something that I think has a lot of potential to catch on. Now, one thing that you mentioned was um, it's not even we're not even adding all these solutions. We're not adding all these things, but we're really just removing barriers and taking away. And and that, I think there's a lot of power in that too. Because I was kind of thinking, like, when someone comes back out of prison and we've already got these permanent punishments, what options do people have at this point?
Absolutely, absolutely. Like I compare it to playing a game and not understanding the rules or the game that they're asking you to play. You don't have all of the pieces. Like you can't play baseball without a bat and a glove and a ball. And it's like you send people out and you say, okay, you've completed your sentence, go home and be a law-abiding citizen. But then at the same time, you tell me where I can't access this house or housing because I have a record, or I can't get this job because of my background. So it's almost backwards. I mean, not almost, it is backwards.
Yeah, I love these analogies. They're perfectly said. Because we're when we center people with lived experience and we get them kind of on board with this journey, I feel like there's a lot of meaning in that, and that's something very um, that's something very productive to do, and it kind of comes full circle when you've been affected by the system that's in place, and then you're working very specifically to change that thing. I mean, that is a full circle.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think I definitely think it brings meaning, but I also think that it builds confidence in knowing that my voice matters, and that, like, my experience, like, if certain systems were in place, or if the system worked as it's supposed to, like, there are certain situations that I shouldn't be in. It's almost like the environment was created before any of us, like before I was born. But if you put somebody in an environment to where, like, it's almost like you're forcing this person to engage in something illegal, more than likely it's going to happen. Now, all the time, does it happen every time? No. But that's the environment that you're creating. Like, you're creating a toxic environment from the first place, and then saying, okay, go out and go to a school that's not fully funded, live in a community that does, in a lot of communities we don't have grocery stores that sell fresh food, and you're asking this person to go out and live the American dream, and it's just, that's not realistic. And so then you send a person to prison, a person completes their sentence, and then they come home, and then when they're able to get involved and they actually see that their voice matters, and that they can learn legislative strategy and the importance of knowing who your elected officials are, the importance of building these relationships, and then also being the leader in this work. Like, it's a very empowering experience. And it is full circle. But I also would just say, I think a lot of these leadership qualities, a lot of individuals, these qualities they had before. It was just the lifestyle that they chose to live was just different. Because a lot of people that I know that were living in the communities, in the streets or whatever, like, they had a lot of skills, but when you give people options to use these skills in a different way, like, then people, it wasn't the skills that led the person to prison, it was the decision that the person made to and how they would use those skills. And so I think a lot of times when they start to see that they've already sort of had, like, these leadership qualities, it's about just putting people in a position to where they can lead and be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. I try to put myself in the position of someone who would be coming out of prison, and you think, all right, well, they have to live somewhere. Well, that's limited. Okay, well then I have to get a job somewhere close to where I live. Well, that's limited too. And if you
Yeah.
want to go to school and do kind of the thing that you want to do, well, that's limited too. So, like, those options are limited, but I like this idea of leadership and kind of honing in those skills that they already have. And me and you talked a little bit about some of the programs that some of the within prison that people took a leadership position on and started developing programs there to kind of help smooth that transition. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, in a lot of the institutions, when I first went into the federal system, I won't say that there were a lot, but the majority of the programs are led by individuals who are there doing time. I don't use the word inmate. So, but the men, like, if we had people that taught, like Martha Stewart's co-defendant, Sam Weisel, taught a philosophy of business class. We had people who taught Spanish classes. So you had the autonomy to sort of develop, like, your own curriculum. And even if the institution didn't provide you a classroom, you could simply say, hey, we're going to meet in the library every day at 2 o'clock to talk about investments. Um, and so it wasn't the institution that really provided these programs. It was the men in prison who developed these programs just because that's how they wanted to do their time. And so for me, it inspired me to want to create, like, curriculums to teach about just like the stock market, and different curriculums to prepare people, so that when they are released, that they will be ready to transition. And then right before I transitioned out, I was the lead person for, like, the reentry, the work, like, inside of prison. So I would help individuals create resumes. We would do mock interviews. We would write like the Social Security office to try to get like your Social Security card, where they would send it to the institution. That way, when you like once you were released, you wouldn't have to go through trying to go through finding out like how do I get my ID. And so we would create curriculum just based on like the need of the institution or interest. A lot of people were interested in learning around like the financial markets, and so we created a curriculum, and it was also a curriculum that was relevant to our culture. Like we didn't try to create a curriculum where it's like we use a lot of these like just big words. It was a curriculum to where we knew it would be relevant. We would use real life examples of like what supply and demand could look like. And it took off.
That's great. I think that's a great idea, and glad that that's happening, because I can imagine, you know, someone gets released and then it's like what's the difference between when they entered and when they exited, and this kind of helps get that ball rolling a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you also, we talked a little bit about your work with Ready Chicago.
Mhm.
Um, could could you could you touch on that just a little bit? Because I think this was really interesting for me to hear about that program, and what sort of things that people were asking for, and what was the best way to help them once they got out of prison.
So Ready Chicago is not necessarily for men transitioning out of prison, even though I believe like 60 or 70% of the participants that were in the program had been formerly incarcerated. Ready Chicago is a violence prevention initiative that offers an 18-month transitional job, but also offers CBT. And so, in partnership with the transitional jobs provider, which were community um, organizations from that are in Inglewood, North Lawndale, and Austin, and then they also partner with an outreach agency who really the outreach agency really sort of handles a lot of like the outreach, the recruitment. They're the ones that go out and sort of engage victims and perpetrators of gun violence and convince them to give Ready Chicago a chance. Some of the things or like common themes that we would hear from the men, like housing was definitely a huge challenge, because even in their change process, if they still live in these communities, like it's sort of hard to say, like a couple weeks ago, I was actively involved in like shooting at each other or shooting at someone. And then now a couple of weeks later, like now that I've made a decision to change my life, that doesn't necessarily mean that the guys from the other community or other block like that they care. So a lot of it was like, how do we relocate people, or can we relocate people to really give them an opportunity to make it? And then if not, we would come up with sort of like a harm reduction plan on like, how can you avoid like as much as possible sort of being in like hot zones. So the outreach worker and the coach would help each participant sort of come up with like their own like safety plan. And that plan would cover like how they get to and from work, like what they sort of do on the weekends. But housing was definitely the number one issue. I would also say something else that we sort of noticed, like on the employment side, like a lot of our guys or the companies that we partnered with, like didn't necessarily understand like a trauma-informed approach. And so like these would be guys that I would say like they're non-service seekers. Like they were not looking for services. and we would offer them a job. So they would go from potentially being in the streets to the next day. Now they're actually like going out on a job. And so that was challenging because a lot of it, the first phase of the program was really around like teaching them like what teamwork looks like how to follow directions, how to work within a team, showing up on time. So just a lot of soft skills that we were really trying to help them develop in the beginning of the program. But I would say that was also a big challenge of just consistently getting people in the program and showing up every day like was a challenge. But overall, like I said, it was a very rewarding experience. To me, it just shows that there's a small population of folks that are driving the violence that I think here in Chicago, and that when you invest in that population, for me, what I saw was that there is a benefit of actively saying like, let's go out, use a trauma-informed approach, and support these young men in their change process. And we saw the results to prove that what we were doing works.
That that is definitely a challenge, and just the way you talk about it, you're not saying it's this big easy thing where we just go out and find people and then we just put them on the path and that's that. But really doing the hard work and planning these things out and the logistics of it, which everyone's got their own situation, and there's not really one easy one size fits all solution. So it's very interesting.
Absolutely.
So we touched on a lot of different things. Is there anything in particular that we haven't talked about that you wanted to kind of highlight or talk about?
Um, I would just say for me, I think like this work is important to me. And even growing up, I never thought in a million years that I would be doing community organizing or advocacy work. But I think for me, like I feel like this is a great opportunity for us, not only as a state, but as a nation, to do what's right. And I think one of the things that I love about working with directly impacted people is that we bring a sense of urgency. And I think in a lot of cases, that sense of urgency is needed because not only are we still sort of experiencing like the barriers after incarceration or these permanent punishments, but it also impacts our families and it also impacts our communities and our ability to really sort of move ahead or move forward in life. Um, and I've seen this all my life. And so like for me being on this end of the work now, like I also bring like this level of patience or tolerance because I can remember like my mind state from like when in my past. And I think that's important because it's not about me going to fix someone, but it's about giving someone the tools to allow them to fix themselves or their community. And then also just being there as a support mechanism. So as people make mistakes and grow, that we're building a network of people that I think really could change and are changing the community and the narrative around incarceration. Incarceration doesn't work. It's almost like you just go to be warehoused for some years and then they let you out. And there's no real intentionality about rehabilitation. It's just a warehouse. And I think we have to come to terms with the fact that a huge percentage of people who go to prison will come out. And we as a society have an opportunity to really shape what the world looks like and what they come back to. And how can we invest in individuals that are currently incarcerated to make sure that they come out prepared to take advantage of all of the removed barriers and et cetera. But I think this is a huge opportunity for us to really reimagine like what we want our world to look like, and to really think of creative ideas without fear. And I hear that a lot in this space, like with people who have been involved in this work for a while. It's like a lot of the ideas are shot down because of fear. And I think we're in a place now to where people are open to new ideas and new energy and the leadership of people that are directly impacted.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It is a good opportunity. Um, and I'm thinking a lot of what you said about forgiveness and kind of the fear of changing, kind of the way that we've approached just the basic fact that people do come out of prison. Um, is it what is that fear? Is it the fear that people are like irredeemable or that they cannot change? Is it just kind of putting people into a box oftentimes?
I think it's all of the above. I think what I've seen is that fear seems to spread faster um, than a great idea. I mean, I see it all the time in the news, like where you really have to read and watch or stay away from certain news channels because it's like it's almost like they're just projecting like this fear. Um, and so I think part of the narrative work that needs to happen is like we have to show people that there are thousands and millions of people that have criminal records that people probably wouldn't even know if they didn't disclose it. And so there is no difference. And um, there has to be like this redemptive or like forgiveness or what's the point of even sending someone to prison in the first place if there is no such thing as redemption or forgiveness. Um, and so I just think we as a society have to, instead of avoiding the tension and the conflict, I think we have to lean into it and even be willing to lean into hearing what the other side has to say and having like conversations to figure out like solutions. But I just think the route that we're taking is just not working. And so we have to push past the fear and have some conversations around what just needs to happen.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think this is a great start. I mean, just from our conversations, I've learned a ton. And, afterwards, I always think about more things and get more connections between the ideas. And again, with the forgiveness, I mean, how young are most people when they're incarcerated for the first time? I mean, our juvenile prison system is huge. When you work with people, I mean, I'm not sure if you have an exact age, but like about how old are most people when they're incarcerated?
So that I don't have any specific data. It would be hard for me to speak on that because I mean in my incarceration there were definitely more. So it was a mixture. I would say it was a mixture of young guys who were constantly coming into the system, but then there were a lot of guys who had aged in the system that had come into the system when they were young. Towards the end of my sentence, I started seeing more like younger people coming in as young as 19. Um, so I would say between the ages of 19 and 26 is like the probably like the majority of like the institutions where I was at. But it's a mixture.
Yeah, I could see that. That's very young. And if just to kind of close up here, if you think about how much the world on the outside changes in in a decade or in 2 decades, and then you come out and it's not the same world that you that you left.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say absolutely. When I went in, I think when I went into the system, I think they had just come out with like texting. So like there was no such thing as like a text. And then when I was released, like that's how people communicate with each other. There were no video phones or picture phones. It was just the Nextels, the Chirps, or flip phones. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot that changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and even if someone in the last year, of course, we, goes without saying how many changes, I talked to you 3 times all through Zoom, which, maybe 2 years ago, that would not have been the norm. It would have been all in person.
Yep, yep, absolutely.
So I think you're working on a great campaign, and everyone at Heartland's doing really great work. And I'm happy that you came on the show and talked about it. Any other closing remarks before we wrap this up?
No, that's it. Like, once again, thanks for having me, and I hope that we can do this again.
Yeah, I'd love to talk again in the future. I will put the Heartland Alliance link in the comments.
Mhm.
The into the to the report. But if there's any updated links in the future as the campaign moves on, just let me know and we'll put that in there as well.
Okay, will do.
All right. I appreciate your time and have a good day. Thanks,
You
Marlon.
too. All right.